Welcome to the Essentially You podcast. Baily Gaddis, how are you doing today, girl?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. And I just want to say shout out to you for being here today, 3 weeks away from your delivery date. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I bet it feels so much more potent to be talking about your book, which is asking for a pregnant friend, to be in pregnancy during this conversation. Has that shifted in any way? And before we even get into that question, really more so, I just love the work that you're doing and so grateful for the work that you're doing. There's so much misunderstanding around pregnancy and even motherhood, so much taboo around both. I find, especially women in postpartum. What was the inspiration for you wanting to really support women in this way?
Yeah, it really started with my pregnancy with my son. Gosh, 9 years ago now is when I was pregnant, and I felt so lost during that experience. I had no idea that this was, the field that I would end up working in. But I just really did not feel like I could find adequate support during that pregnancy. And then the childbirth preparation method that I used to birth him was amazing, and it completely transformed my experience. And so that really piqued my interest. And let's see, when he was 6 months old, I schlepped him and my husband to San Diego, got certified to teach childbirth prep. And then that really quickly led into being a birth doula. And then I started writing about this topic for, different magazines and websites a few months later. So it all happened fast, and it has been amazing to connect with so many women that are going through the same struggles that I went through then, and I'm definitely going through now, 9 years later. And yeah, I just really wanted to offer women more holistic support. And I wanted, especially with this book, to provide a space where women could allow themselves to be vulnerable, to release a lot of the shame and embarrassment that can come up during this really wild journey into motherhood. And yeah, it's been just amazing to hear all those stories and to be by a woman's side as she goes through this really profound transformation.
Hmm. So true. Oh my gosh, what a transformation. And it was really mind-blowing in my own pregnancy how little, like, the day to day or the changes that were going to happen, how little we as women really knew about going in, even the metabolic changes, the hormone changes, and all of it. I felt like I had to do so much research to really understand what was going on. And I was just so like blown away. But I'm like, really? We saunter into pregnancy and all these massive shifts and changes, and we're not told nothing, you know? And so much of the content out there can be so generic and not really applicable to each and every one of us. And so it was a really fascinating journey for me. Luckily I'm a researcher by trade, so I kind of just got into it very quickly, but that's just because I've been doing that for decades. And I can imagine so often women are just like, what is going on right now? I want to know really quickly before we get into, some of the meat of this is talk to me about what it's felt like from the first experience, first pregnancy for you with your son and this pregnancy, knowing what you know today.
Yeah, it has been a mixed bag.
Okay.
Physically, this pregnancy has been so much harder. So I've been able to relate so much more to, almost everything I write about in the new book, especially the physical components, because it has been a much more traditional pregnancy in regards to, nausea and sweating and just swelling, all of the things I'm experiencing. And then, with having so much more knowledge, that has allowed me to have an easier journey emotionally. So I would say that's the big difference. The first pregnancy, I had so much anxiety, so many doubts, so many big questions that I never asked, or like you said, I just couldn't find quality answers to. And so this time I feel more calm in a lot of ways. But of course, with anything, like, the more you know, the more you know. So there's some new fears that have cropped up that I'm working on, with my midwives. I'm putting in a lot of work to kind of have that, like, clear emotional slate going into the birth experience. But for the most part, I mean, of course, I'm so grateful that I have so much more knowledge and experience going into it this time around, and I'm able to appreciate it more. That's for sure.
I love that statement of like, once you know, like you can't unknow.
Yeah.
Right. And
Exactly.
and there's something to be said about that knowing, but then also like especially when it comes to women's health and women's hormone health, I just know, like my husband's always making fun of me. I'm just like the bearer of bad news at the party, like I just know more stuff. And so if something comes up, I can just really download on that. And Alex is like, that's not what they were looking for. And I can say, yes, as a mama, I was an older mama who got pregnant. I was 41 when I was pregnant. And I can speak to after my pregnancy, like pregnancy wasn't my favorite thing. I love that women love pregnancy. I love those women who love pregnancy. Like I love it for you. But it was not a love affair for me. It was so uncomfortable. And I had never been pregnant when I'm 20, so I don't have any comparison to go by. But I have a feeling that it probably would have been easier if I had been younger, energy wise, to manage. So yeah, I can speak into the fact that sometimes it just can be a very uncomfortable journey moving through it. Now, then besides the discomfort, besides a lot of, just the physical feeling and the shifts and changes in the body for every trimester, can you speak into why so many women feel so much shame, even fear around pregnancy, especially as they go further into their pregnancy, like deeper into those trimesters?
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from the fear of the unknown, right? When we're going into something that impacts us so profoundly, physically and emotionally, that's intense already. Again, in my experience, I know so much and it's still intense, but for a lot of us, we don't have a lot of knowledge, going into this. And kind of going back to what you were talking about before, when you were starting to research and you just couldn't find a lot of quality information, that was a big piece for me of why I created this book. Half of the time I spent writing this book, about 8 months, was all research, was reading really dense studies about all the topics to really try to figure out like what is the accurate information here, because a lot of times doing a simple Google search, we just get more confused, and that can intensify the fear and all the different concerns that a woman has. And then with the emotional questions and all of that comes up, what I found was a lot of times the information you could find was laced with so much judgment. And that, at least for me, being pregnant and reading that, even though I knew like there's no reason for me to feel shame or embarrassment about this topic, reading like on social media these really vicious comments to women that were being open about maybe feeling a lot of resentment towards their partner during pregnancy, or all these normal things that we go through, but there's so much judgment. So if a woman is able to get quality answers to those questions, that fear can be reduced. But kind of going back to your question, I think the unknown, it's what can create so much anxiety going through this journey.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's so true. I mean, that kind of that main event, that pinnacle moment of birthing your baby, and clearly so much judgment around that topic too, alone, how you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, all these things. It's so crazy. Like so much, I mean, I feel like there's just so much judgment wrapped around all aspects of motherhood. I know another area that you really help women focus on is not just the pregnancy leading into birth, but also the postpartum piece as well. I think for me, there was definitely a lot of unknown and not sure what was going on, but I knew that birth was going to happen. Like I was going to get through birth. And I don't know if that's always everyone's mindset, but I was like, birth, it's a very important blip in time, but it's a blip in time. Like for me, that was kind of how I approached it. It was the postpartum part that I was most fearful of. Like I was like, oh my gosh, they just send you home with a baby, and you've got to figure that out. And so that was really where I feel, for me, I just feel like, especially with my experiences with our pediatricians, lots of shame, lots of, finger wagging, lots of scaring you, lots of fear. That whole just leaving the hospital, those first several weeks after the hospital just felt like such a hot mess, crazy tornado. I don't know if you approach this inside of the book as well, but how often do you find women on the other side of pregnancy are struggling just as much, if not more, than when they were pregnant?
I think it is definitely fair to say that more women struggle more after having the baby. And it's so intuitive of you that that's the part that you are more nervous about. Because I have a lot of women that, they are just focused on the birth and they're really nervous about it and not thinking at all about what comes after. And it's like fair enough. Birth is intense, but like you said, it's, even a really long birth, it's probably not going to be more than 2 days of your life, which yes, is like a lot to go through, but you'll get through it. But then, like you said, you have this baby. And now you have to do something with this baby, and your body is still going through like upheaval, hormonally, as you obviously know, and emotionally. And there's so much happening. And so, I think it is crucial for women to start to at least explore, what that might look like. There's, obviously my book, other amazing books about the postpartum period, that we don't know, obviously, of exactly what our postpartum experience is going to be like, right? We don't know if we want to breastfeed, we don't know if our milk will come in. I mean, we don't know if the baby will be a baby that sleeps a lot or doesn't. I mean, there's so much that we'll just have to learn on the job, so to speak. But I think, yeah, for women to realize that it might be really hard and that's okay. I think that's the thing to remember, right? Because we think, oh, we'll have this baby and I'll be in bliss and everything will be perfect. And when that's not our experience, we can feel a lot of things like I'm a bad mother, or maybe I'm not doing something right. And going back to that judgment, we place a lot of judgment on ourselves if it's not all rainbows and butterflies after that baby comes out. But to know that, yes, for a lot of women, that is actually the hardest period, and you do get through it. It's like, as having an older baby now, it's like at least for me, the first 6 months was the most intense, and then it gets easier. So to remind yourself of that, kind of this too shall pass. If you're just feeling totally exhausted or depleted, you will get through it. But it is okay if you have some struggles in that early period, because everybody does, really.
Like everyone always says, you just cannot prepare. Because I tried, because I really did try to over prepare. I was like, I'm going to
so
do
much you can do. Yeah.
And I think that's, at least for me, like a lot of people, I felt a lot of love during the pregnancy, and I was pregnant during the pandemic too. So I didn't get to spend as much time with people then, but I just felt a lot more love, a lot more grace for me during the pregnancy. But then, girl, it was like a shame sandwich on the other side. Everyone has got an opinion about what you need to do about your baby. And that was the really struggle. And I think, like I said, I think the worst shame I got was literally from pediatricians. Like they would just ask me questions, and I was like, do people, like, I think it was a question about his car seat, like if it was put in on the right side or right, if it was back facing versus forward facing. I was like, are you really asking me that question right now? Like, I was just so offended. But there was like a slew of questions I just felt like I was getting pummeled with in that first exchange. And then clearly family members and all kinds of people having all kinds of opinions about what you need to be doing. And there was just a lot of, I know we're not even going to get into the whole breastfeeding process, all of it just messy, so much shame, so much fear. Like it made me just like shun away from the medical system and from people in general. I was just like, get out of here with all of this mess. And so I have a feeling that, not only do women experience a lot of shame, but how not only, and I know how it's impacted me, but how do you see it impacting a lot of other women in their early journey into motherhood?
Yeah, I think it impacts us in a few ways. Certainly the stress of feeling that shame can physically, make the experience harder when we're, distracted by all that shame. We're having to process a lot. It takes a lot of energy. And I think it really pulls us out of the present moment and out of our intuition. So for a lot of us, we are, I really believe that all mothers, they are the expert on their baby, more so than the pediatrician, your mother-in-law, your mother. You know what is best for your baby. But when we are shrouded in that shame, when we're distracted by that shame, it is harder to tap into that wisdom that we innately have. And it makes it harder to enjoy the journey. You know, it breaks my heart when I have women that are so overcome by that shame that I'm supporting, and they're had women say this to me verbatim, like, I just can't enjoy my baby because I feel so much shame, so much overwhelm, that, and a lot of it, like you were saying, was coming from opinions from the pediatricians, from people around them that were maybe not directly saying you're doing it wrong, but saying, well, you're not doing it the way I would have done it, or the way I think is, the right way. So yeah, it can be really draining, and sadly it can take away from, in some cases, the bonding of the mother and the baby, because there's so much distraction.
Hmm. You mentioned the 6-month mark and how kind of things turn a corner. I remember people just try to get to 6 months. I was like, I need to get to like 9 months. um, and I was thinking about that time, for so many new mamas coming out of it, and just trying to manage all of the things that are being said. And I still feel, I mean, I guess even our babies are approaching 1, and even beyond, there's still a lot of opinions and a lot of shame and a lot of things, a lot of criticisms, a lot of things being said about what you should and shouldn't do. Like we're co-sleeping with Kingston, and I am literally exhausted. I'm not going to pretend. I'm just happy I showed up today. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where I'm at in this journey. And I have a lot of people who have a lot of opinions about that, about how to just constantly, continuously. Like I just want women to be prepared. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't end, When do you feel like women start to get a little bit more comfortable and really kind of owning that they are making the right decisions for their babies? Do you find that there's kind of a tipping point for some women? Because at some point you just kind of put up the force fields, you put up the shields, and you just kind of roll with it. I feel like I'm at that place now. Girl, the opinions are no less, but I finally feel like I'm really resolute, and I feel really good about the decisions I'm making.
Yeah, I think the tipping point is, for a lot of women, is somewhere between that 6-month to 1 year mark, because by that point, we've really gotten to know our baby. We've gotten to know ourselves more as a mother, what again really feels good. That the very beginning, so much is shifting, right? There's so much change that it's hard to really feel like we're on solid ground. Even if we have strong instincts, it's hard to like fully trust them. For me, it was like around 6 months, and I started to feel like, all right, I know my baby, I know what works for us, and it was easier to let all of those opinions just kind of slide off. It would still trigger me sometimes, obviously, but I didn't feel as much, pressure to defend myself. I didn't feel as defensive when all of the opinions were thrown my way. Even with my husband, because we co-slept with our son, and that was honestly the only way that I could get any sleep. And he had always been told by his mother, the baby sleeps in a crib. Like, that's what you do. And so even within my own relationship, those first 6 months, it was really stressful as we navigated as a family what works best for us. And then, yeah, around 6 months, so much settled. And I work with a lot of women that maybe they had medical complications in the beginning, or their baby did, and I found that typically their tipping point comes closer to like 8 months and 9 months. It's just a little bit extended because there's so many additional challenges that they're dealing with in the beginning. Postpartum depression, obviously women that are navigating that can make it harder to get to that place where you feel like, all right, like I feel confident, I feel good. So again, there's no magic number, obviously, but typically 6 months to 1 year, you're starting to feel better. It's easier to just kind of block out all of the noise.
Good to know. Yeah, I feel like I've finally hit my stride there too. So I was just curious, because I was like, am I ever going to feel, like really trusting? I mean, clearly always tuning into the gut. And I want to ask you a little bit more about that, especially in those early months of postpartum, and just in general. I mean, that's the one thing that we as women have, is our gut intuition. That is what we've got. and the fact that we're running the whole show and we're the common denominator for everything. I mean, all that too. But like, you've got to be able to trust your gut instinct over all that noise. Is there any recommendations or advice for how we can tap into that, even during times where we feel hopeless, we feel fear, we feel like we've lost our way, our path?
Yeah, what I tell women, and of course sometimes it's not this simple, but so often with our intuition, it's like that first voice that you hear after asking yourself a question is more often than not your intuition giving you a sign. And then where we get lost is when we start to like really analyze everything and we kind of go down the rabbit hole. So I tell women, especially if they're, I'm supporting them during pregnancy, it's like start to practice now. Even with like, what do I want to eat for dinner? Or like it can be little questions. It doesn't have to be this huge, parenting topic. Just start with little things and start to notice that voice that comes up. Because almost always our instincts, our intuition will give us the answer that more often than not is the best one for our unique situation, right? There's never a perfect answer for really any situation, especially having to do with parenting, but to start to listen to that voice, to notice it, and to toy around with listening to it, because it takes a while to develop that trust as well, to trust that, oh, maybe I don't have to ruminate over this thing for hours or days or even longer. I can trust myself. So start with little things, listen to the voice of the intuition, and you'll start to realize that you can trust yourself so much more than you likely previously believed.
I so appreciate that. That is such great advice to give. I think any woman at any point in time in our lives it's important to hear that now more than ever. So I want to talk a little bit about the book and kind of some of the most common questions that you've been asked that you address in the book that you felt you're like, this needs to be in this book because I'm not seeing it anywhere and it comes up all the time. What are some of those?
So the first one that came to mind, and this has to do with breastfeeding, I've had so many women like call or text me after they've had their baby, and I can tell they're like so embarrassed to ask the question. They're saying that, I'm feeling aroused when I'm breastfeeding and I feel like there's something wrong with me. I don't want to breastfeed because I'm having, these physical sensations. And so that was one of the first questions that I wrote down to make sure I include in the book. And what I tell women is what you're experiencing is one of the most natural biological responses to a certain stimuli. So, when we breastfeed, the body releases oxytocin, the love hormone. That's a
Mhm.
hormone that is also released during sex. When we're breastfeeding, a lot of times the uterus has, pretty subtle contractions. That's something that happens during orgasm. When you're breastfeeding your baby, your nipple has to become erect to allow the baby to latch on. That's something that also happens during arousal. So there's a lot of commonalities between the two. But what I tell women is this is your body having a response. It's not your mind saying that you are sexually attracted to your baby or anything like that. It is a very, very natural response. And this can be harder for a lot of women, but I try to tell them, if you can, just enjoy it. Know that it's just feelings in your body. It's not actual sexual attraction to your baby or the act of breastfeeding. It's really, in so many ways, your body is trying to make you feel as good as possible, so you want to continue breastfeeding. That's why all of those things are happening, and that so many women experience it, but hardly anybody talks about it because we're afraid, right? We're afraid that we're going to be labeled as a pervert, or all of the other, there's so many words that come to mind that I have seen, on social media, especially when a woman is brave enough to share, hey, has anybody else felt this during breastfeeding? And I mean, talk about shame and judgment. Some really hateful things can be said about that. It was really important to me to have that in the book, to start dispelling the myths about that, and to help women realize you are absolutely not the only one.
I so appreciate that. Yeah. Unfortunately, that did not happen for me, but I'm
Me neither. I had a
so
little
grateful that some women,
bit.
it's definitely not happening to me now with those little teeth.
Yeah,
So
well, there you go, right?
That's a great example of that. I love that. And then I would ask you just a couple of those taboo questions. Clearly, that's one of those taboo questions, right? Like that people are just like, it's so scared to ask because it's such a just sensitive subject. I mean, breastfeeding alone, like I one example of this too is we were in the doctor's office for something. It is 6 months. I don't know, food had come up, solids had come up, and I was still pretty much exclusively feeding Kingston, so a little bit of solids, but not much. I had mentioned that I was exclusively pretty much breastfeeding Kingston it was like the early 6 months. And the pediatrician looked at me and she's like, oh my God, like really? Cause that is just so hard. That's just so hard to do at this point. And I was like, oh my goodness. It was such a crazy moment. So I think about just breastfeeding alone, where people stand on that topic and the tabooness of it. But then, bring in the oxytocin and the good sensations. It's like this another level of shame and taboo around breastfeeding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and that's why it was so funny when I was creating the questions, the postpartum, there was like a whole section on breastfeeding. I'm like, oh wow, there is a lot coming up, around this topic, not just with, the arousal that I mentioned, but it's like, and it's like this erogenous zone and it's leaking and it's, there's so much happening there. And like you said, there's all sorts of opinions, I took my son to a dentist like a year and a half and I told her, yeah, he still breastfeeds, not exclusively by that point, but he still breastfeeds a lot. And she said, you're going to ruin his teeth. Like she shamed me for breastfeeding past a year. I've never experienced so much shame and so much judgment. And so there's, a lot of misinformation out there, and it really confuses us. it can create a lot of conflict, as we navigate this really, for a lot of women, what is a really big piece of mothering. Even if you're choosing to bottle feed, it's still like a big thing. Like how we feed our baby is really, really complex. And so, I made sure to go deep into that in the book to really give women as much quality information as I could.
I so appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, just that topic alone, it just brings women to their knees. That's what I have found. Okay. So I want to know, I have some quick fire questions. But before we get into those quick fire questions, really quickly, what is the most important thing that you want expecting mamas to know?
Yeah, I think, a big thing is, as you are going through this journey, know that really like nothing that you experience or think or feel is wrong or is a sign that you are going to be or are like a bad mother, or that you are like missing some essential chip that the rest of us have. This is a really, really wild, complex journey with so many challenges. And so to just give yourself as much grace and flexibility and forgiveness, because we all make missteps. We all make missteps on this journey. So to be really, really gentle with yourself. I think that's the pith of the message. Be as gentle as you can with yourself as you navigate this wild, wonderful journey.
Hmm. I love that. That I agree. I feel like I can't hear that enough.
Mm.
I feel like I needed to hear it yesterday.
Yeah.
That's how much I need to hear it.
Yeah.
So I heard it today. That's great. I love it. Okay, so I want to move into some quick fire questions. And really quickly before we do, Baily Honey, the book is on Amazon. Is there a place that you want us to go and go check out the book?
Yeah, it's available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, all the places. Amazon is probably the easiest place to get the book, and of course all those Amazon reviews help so much, so I often point people in that direction. But yeah, it's available for the most part wherever books are sold.
And the book is called, again, Asking for a Pregnant Friend. So love that so much. And then they can also go check you out at your website as well, and that is bailygaddis.com, and we'll have that link inside of the show notes too.
Perfect. Yeah,
awesome. Okay, so here are my quick fire questions. There's just 5 of them and they move pretty quickly. So here is number 1. Okay. What is the one thing you are deeply grateful for right now?
Bread.
Any specific kind of bread, or any bread, all the breads?
Sourdough toast is my pregnancy addiction.
Yes. Anything on top of that?
Yeah. So ghee, the like butter that doesn't have the dairy. avocado when I'm being good, and honey when I am,
A little
wanting a
something,
treat.
yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
exactly.
What was something you've done that made you feel extremely happy in the last week?
I went on a walk with my husband, which
Mm.
sounds so simple, but we don't do it enough.
It's one of my favorite activities too. We just did that. We watched the sunset over the ocean yesterday. It's so beautiful. With Kingston. Kingston was he loves to be worn. So,
Yeah.
so that was what was going on. What's one thing that surprises people about you?
I think that I have such a sense of humor. People think I'm going to be really serious and earnest about all of this, but we have to laugh. We have to find the humor in all of this.
I love that. I love that. We definitely do. What book or film has recently had a big impact on you and why?
I am working through A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and it is so complex but so amazing. I have to read the same passage over and over and over again, but it's really helping me, figure out how to be more present, which I think is essential going into having a baby again.
Yes.
That's
Yes. Love it. Such a great book. Oh, such a great book. And last, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
To just trust the journey. Don't try to force it.
Yay. Baily, honey, that is powerful. That is such great advice to any 18-year-old. Absolutely.
I need it now, right? I need to give, that's the advice I need to give myself every single day.
Real talk, real talk. That's surrender for sure. Baily, honey, it was such a pleasure to get to connect with you today and learn about all of the yummy mamaness you're bringing to the table. I'm so excited to check out your book, and I know that it's going to be such a powerful resource for many women for years to come. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.